series, which is being run by the Irish Medtech Skillnet. For those of you who haven't really worked with us before or are new to us, the Irish Medtech Skillnet are one of 70 Skillnet business networks that are funded by Skillnet Ireland through the National Training Fund. So this morning's session, which we're delighted to bring you, is titled Reflect, Realign and Refocus, Building Your Playbook for 2025. And we are very lucky to have two very well-established speakers with us this morning in David Gillick and Dr. Brian Pennie. And today's session will really focus around planning, reviewing, and prioritizing and motivation. And we'll be following today's session up then with another session in early January that will link over that motivation. So we'll carry that thread through to the second session. And then we'll also be looking at overcoming setbacks, habits, and building accountability. So that's the, I guess, planned focus of these two workshops. So just before we start, I will just set a few ground rules. So if everyone could maybe just turn off your cameras, please, and mute your mics. That would be great. The session is going to be about 45 minutes long, and we will leave time at the end. So there'll be 10-15 minutes at the end for questions. If you do have a question as David and Brian are speaking, feel free to pop it into the Q&A box and we'll run through them at the end. If you feel really strongly about something or you want to add to the conversation, we want this to be a dynamic session. So if there is something that you would like to add or ask straight away, Brian and David are open to us, having an interactive conversation. So if you want to ask something straight away, please do raise your hand and we'll call upon you and you can unmute yourself and ask a question or add a comment if you like. So we do want to keep this a very dynamic session. So I'll just introduce the two guys now. Like I said, we're very lucky to have both David and Brian here with us today. David Gillick, who many of you will have been very familiar with on our screens in the summer, is an Olympian, a motivational speaker, broadcaster, and high performance coach. And Dr. Brian Pennie is a neuroscientist, best-selling author, and personal transformation expert. So I'll hand over now to yourself. Brian is going to kick us off.
Lovely. Thanks so much, Yvonne. And thanks for joining, guys. I'm really excited for today's session for two reasons. This is a topic I absolutely love and I put a lot of time into because I found something that's really, really valuable. But I'm actually really excited to learn from David today specifically. He's very interested in this topic as well. As a former Olympian and stuff like that, I'm actually dying to dig into his brain to see how he does that stuff. But one thing that I've recognized in my own life, and it's something that I struggled with in the past, reviewing and planning is something, it's not the most enjoyable thing in the world, to be quite honest. And it's something I put off and I didn't do. But the more I've done it in my life, the bigger the gains I've got as a result. And there's a line that I love: what gets measured gets managed, or even more importantly, what gets measured gets improved. So the best way to measure stuff is to review and assess, and then plan for going forward. And because we need to have those goals, and we don't always hit all of our goals, but we need to have a plan, we need to review, and we need to pivot and change going forward. So what we're going to be talking about today is reviewing 2024. I'm going to give you a bit of a takeaway document as well. Me and Dave are going to chat in between each of the topics, but I'm going to go through a takeaway document that I use. And interestingly enough, when we were asked to do this session, this is the week when I review my year. So I actually selected this morning to review the year. And again, it's not an easy thing to do. So I've made the document a little bit smaller for you guys as well. So when I go through that, you can use different elements that work for you. But it's about using questions to reflect and take a snapshot of your life to get perspective on that and bring it forward into the following year. So following on to that, we're going to talk about planning for 2025. And two really key topics that align with that is prioritization, what we're going to prioritize. And that obviously comes into the review section and the planning section. What is important to us? What do we want to prioritize? And then we're going to talk about motivation as well, because motivation is a funny term and some people think they're just not motivated. But sometimes you have to create the right environment and the right structures and strategies for yourself to be motivated. So we're going to touch on that section as well. And then again, we'll make it interactive. Jump in if you have that burning need to ask a question, and we'll have that section at the end for chats as well. But as Yvonne mentioned as well, the second section, it's more about taking action. So it's dealing with setbacks, because you can have the best plan in the world, but life will get in the way. So despite those setbacks, how do you jump back on the wagon? How do you keep yourself accountable? And how do you build in powerful habits to keep you aligned with your goals? That's what the second section is going to be all about. So basically, the fourth section then, before I get into my review doc and bring us a little bit through that, Dave, I'd love to throw it over to you just to get a flavour of how you review the year and your thoughts on reviewing years and doing that as well, just in general, would be great.
Yeah, cheers, Brian. And I like the way you bigged me up. I'm actually more interested in getting into your brain, because I know you have a wealth of knowledge in there as well. But no, look, I think what's important about these sort of sessions is that open conversation about planning and also an understanding that we're all very different. Okay, so in my background, my year was actually from September through to August. So kind of mentally, you know, the new year would start, let's say the 1st of September, because in the athletic world, the track and field world, that's the way the year would pan out, you know. So kind of August was that time where late August was the opportunity maybe to review the season, review the year, and then put things in place for the following year. Obviously, in kind of a different life by this stage, that was nearly 11 years ago that I was an athlete. So that transition into kind of where I'm at now, it took a bit of time. And it's probably something that I kind of struggled with in terms of planning. What do I want to do? You touched on motivation. What was, like, who was I? What did I want to do? And then how did I build kind of, I suppose, or even put things, you know, prioritizing and stuff like that, because I didn't really know. So the way I kind of look at it now is, and it's taken a while, I'm not going to be honest, and a bit of help. And this is probably an important thing for people, is that sometimes we take ownership of this and we try and do it ourselves. But I'd always recommend people to have these conversations, you know, even kind of, you know, in the world of business, who's the person that maybe you respect, a colleague, a manager, line manager, whatever it might be. And almost we talk about appraisals, you know, sometimes we're shy about getting that feedback, but that can be a good kind of starting point for people to kind of go, okay, well, you know, what do I want to do? Getting that feedback, they might see something that you never thought of. And I think those things can be quite relative. But in my world now, the way I kind of approach it, and Brian, you mentioned that you're doing your plan now, and I know we might get some insights in that, but I tend to kind of look at it from a January perspective. And the reason that is because I find December a bit of a crazy month. And maybe there's people that be kind of similar to that. There's deadlines to be met. You're trying to wrap things up before you have the break before Christmas. And that's maybe from a business perspective. But then you've got life in there as well. We've 3 kids. So you can imagine everything that goes with that in terms of, you know, Santa, Christmas presents, all that. So for me to kind of create the time, sit down and actually really get into the nitty gritty of reviewing the year, it's a difficult thing to do. So what I find now is that I look at kind of the first week of January, the first kind of 2 weeks of January, as an opportunity where in my line of work, it can be a little bit quieter. That gives me an opportunity to really kind of get into the nitty gritty of it, and put plans in place, because I'm somebody who, coming from the world of sport, everything is mapped out, everything. So if you watch the Olympics this year, the athletes that you would have seen compete, they would have been working off plans that were probably, you know, 4 years in the making, you know, because an Olympic cycle. So every day, every week, every month, every season is mapped out. And you kind of tend to become a little bit precomposed to that, conditioned to operate in that way. Whereas now I struggled with that initially, to the point where I felt a little bit lost because I didn't have a plan. And it took me a long time to actually get back to that point. So what I do now is I do a little bit of a SWOT analysis. So my strengths, my weaknesses, from a personal standpoint, okay, like, you know, my AFDs, my areas for development. So I will look at the year and I will kind of say, okay, well, what areas can I get better at? What areas do I want to maybe explore a little bit more? What do I need to do to get into that space? Who can help me? So when I was competing, we used to kind of put a pyramid in place. And at the very top of that little pyramid, that block at the very top was the achievement for the year. So again, it's very easy. And as Brian mentioned, what gets measured gets improved. So you're looking at times, you're looking at literally the nuts and bolts of an athletic performance at time. So you stick the time up on top, then you work back. And all those little blocks are literally the plan, the little things that I could do on a consistent basis that was going to help me improve, the little 1% there, the little 1% there. And that way just gave me a bit bit of clarity about, okay, well, how I was going to do that, and also who were going to help me along the way. And the great quote that I always go back to: a goal without a plan is just a wish. And I think sometimes a lot of people, we want to do things, we want to get better, we want to maybe get that promotion, we want to maybe earn more money, we want to go on the holiday, but it's the strategy, it's the process. And that's where a lot of people fall down. They don't put the things in place in order to achieve what that goal might be. And I think that is a key part in terms of, one, planning, but also getting a bit of clarity around what it is that you want to do for yourself. And that then kind of leads into, well, how and when do you give yourself the opportunity to maybe even just stew over a few thoughts? I find now running for me is something that I do that clears my own head. And even this morning, you know, it's December, there's a lot happening. You're already kind of looking into 2025. Where do you get that space to maybe be with your own thoughts? Some people are very good in terms of sitting down and actually planning, getting the pen and paper out and allowing themselves to mull over things, write things down. Other people are better through activity. And that's where maybe it's a cycle, going to the gym, going for a run, where you give yourself the opportunity to maybe explore your own thoughts. And I find, for me personally, I do that when I'm out running and I'm exercising, and that just gives me a bit of clarity. Even today, come back in, I might write down a couple of things that really kind of jumped into my head, because the world is busy. And right now, there's an awful lot of people who are juggling and spinning various plates. And I was chatting to Brian before this, and one of the things we kind of didn't want to do was come on here and go, oh, this is what you need to do. Because there will be people that are like, you know what, I'm almost at capacity now. And giving yourself a bit of time, giving yourself a bit of freedom to kind of think, okay, do you know what, I'm busy right now. I still have an opportunity, whether it's over Christmas, early in the new year, to plan and review 2024 before you actually put things in place for 2025. So I think for me, like, I factor in everything. And it took a long time. Before, it was all work, it was all financial, it was all, you know, about kind of making money. And then I realized I'm forgetting a huge part of my life: my family, my friends, the things that I want to do outside of work, holidays, you know, getting back into a bit of activity. All of these things are very, very important to me. And again, I put that to people is, when you're planning, you got to do it from an holistic point of view. You got to actually look at, okay, well, like, you know, what are the important things in my life? What are the things that I like doing? What are the things that make me feel happy? What are the things that maybe, you know, refill that emotional tank, that you feel good about yourself? Yes, work is a massive part, but also outside of that, your friends, your family, you know, the things you want to do for yourself. And I got to be honest, this was something that I probably didn't put a value on. And I know Brian touched on prioritization, and, you know, we will come around to that, but like, you have to put a value on these things, because if you don't, you won't factor them in to your plans for next year. And I'm talking about the basic things of, like, you know, when do you get your time off? When do you create a boundary where you can be present with the people that matter in your world, your kids, your loved ones, your partners, your husbands and your wives? That's all very, very important. And if we don't kind of put a value on these things, we won't include them. It's as simple as that. And that's something that I didn't do. So again, you're looking at the life aspect to it, your family, your work, your holidays, your downtime, because we want people to plan for everything. You know, you want to factor in all aspects of your life, and that makes the plan a little bit more robust. It makes the plan a little bit more maybe real as well. And I think the final thing I'll say, Brian, is, like, I think what's important as well, that you can't be too rigid with plans. They change. And Brian, you touched on that, like, life, like, you don't know what's going to happen next week or 6 weeks down the line. And I think sometimes if we're too rigid, we put too much pressure on ourselves, and then we have that guilt of almost kind of, oh, this isn't going to happen. And then it just kind of falls flat in its face. And you can reference kind of exercise in this, because, you know, a lot of people, New Year's resolutions, I want to do this, I want to do that. It takes a long time to build a habit. And I know, again, Brian, you're an expert in this space, but the habit has to be cultivated. It takes a bit of time. And we need to be kind to ourselves. We need to allow ourselves to, you know, you're going to have your days that things go really well. You're going to have your days that maybe it doesn't, for whatever reason. And that's okay. So I think, you know, the point that I'm making is, as much as we're talking about reviewing and planning, I think it's very individual. People will plan in their own unique way. people will kind of maybe do it now before Christmas. You might do it over Christmas. You might do it, the first couple of weeks of January. That's okay too. I think the most important thing is that you do give yourself the opportunity to allow yourself mull over your own thoughts. Allow yourself to answer the question, how was 2024 for me? How do I feel, if I was to rate 2024? And that could be a starting point. And then you can get into the nitty gritty. Okay, in different aspects of my life. So that kind of, the circles, from work to social to family to, holidays, rate them. Even for a starting point, rate them and be open and honest with yourself. And if there's people that you value, people's opinion that you value, don't be afraid to bring them into the conversation. I work with, I have mentors, I have advisors. These are people who would have helped me in my sporting career. I retired. I thought they're of no use to me. It's only in the last couple of years, these people they're just so brilliant for me because I can go and I can have a conversation with them. And if I'm honest with them, they will be honest with me, and they'll see things in me that I will never see, and they'll challenge me. And I want that feedback because that holds me to account. And I think that's very important. So whoever that person might be, a colleague, a loved one, a friend, I think it's no harm having an honest conversation. And just even that kind of, okay, I'm reviewing 2024. Do you have any input? And you've got to take the feedback. Okay. You got to be honest, but I think that's a good starting point as well. So again, there's a couple of factors in there. I think give yourself a bit of time, allow yourself to be open and honest with yourself, allow yourself to obtain some feedback, and just don't be too rigid on yourself would be kind of probably the 4 key areas going forward. Do you want to throw anything in there, Brian?
Yeah, I love all of that, Dave. There's so much I want to build on there before I go into the doc, but I think that's one of the most important things. Like, we can't see our own BS, so sometimes asking someone is so. I have people in my life, I call them they're idiot checkers. They check me for being an idiot. What am I missing? Because sometimes we can't see the wood from the trees. Like, that's the reality of it. So asking someone is great. But just before I go into the doc on things you were saying there, I just think it's really, really important. Like, I used to not do reviews and plans because I felt the friction of it. It's not something I enjoy because it's not easy. Yeah. But just because it's not easy doesn't mean it's not. It doesn't mean it's not important. Like, the hard things are usually the most important things. And I used to rationalize my way out of it because I just didn't want to do it. And then I remember just thinking to myself, like, Google do this, Facebook do this, every company does this because that's how you get results. And I says, why am I applying this to my own life? So that kind of gave me the perspective shift. Now, even though I don't want to do this and I don't like to do this and it doesn't feel enjoyable, it's something that I have to do. Now, building on that as well, the document I'm going to share, I'm going to give 2 little versions of it, a shorter version of it. But equally, if you're the type of person that you haven't got much time, you have loads of activities with kids and you just haven't got much time, maybe take 2 or 3 of the questions, whatever works for you, just to reiterate what you said there, because I think that's absolutely crucial. So I'm just going to share the documents. And as I said, I
might jump in there 1 sec.
Yeah, shoot away there.
I might jump in. I think as well, what's important to acknowledge is that we live in a world where you'll be inundated with, like, from the social media perspective, you'll see this now begin to develop over, like, from the TikToks to Instagram, that, people will start throwing up reviewing the year and you'll see reels and things like that. Like, always take that with a pinch of salt and just check in with yourself. How do you feel when you see that? Because if it's having a negative impact, are you feeling like, oh my God, like, look at that year, that's amazing, my year wasn't like that? Whatever it is, from a family perspective, a holidays, or even from a, professional standpoint. I always remember last year, that's what I saw. That was my whole social media was inundated with people's fantastic 2023s. And I remember kind of thinking, do you know what, how's that impacting on me? And it wasn't great. I'll be honest, it wasn't great. You start kind of looking, oh, well, my year wasn't as good as somebody else's. And I think that can be a negative driver. So then, as Brian kind of mentioned there, it feels uncomfortable then to review your year. You don't want to do it. And you just kind of go, do you know what, forget about it, and you move on. And that's not what we want. So again, it's kind of just referencing that because this will come thick and fast to people in terms of social media and even the conversation around, oh, what's your goals for next year, New Year's resolutions. And I think we say it a bit tongue in cheek as well. But there's no harm in having the goal. goal. And that's the key thing as well, you know, that I probably didn't mention was like, we all need goals because that motivates us, that inspires us, that challenges us. And I think even getting a little bit of nerves and thinking, okay, I'm going to write this down, that's a good place to be in. I think Brian, just before this call, you kind of mentioned that you had your kind of 10 hit list that you wanted in 2024. And that's fantastic. But what Brian referenced was that, you know what, some days he'd look at it and then other days he'd be thinking, oh my God, I'm not there yet. And that's okay. I think we have to be a little bit kinder to ourselves. We have to allow ourselves to have our goals and aim for them. You mightn't hit them all, but maybe if you hit one or two, that's success in itself. And I think it's just allowing ourselves to be a little bit, just a little bit kind of like fluid with it all.
Yeah, and it's on that point as well. Like I basically the document I'm going to share, I'm going to share now. What you call it? I basically I do it's sort of a bigger review, and then I refine it down to a couple of really important points, which I put on my phone. To ironically, I put them on my phone. And my number one goal was to destroy phone distractions, which I didn't do this year. So it's a bigger goal for me this year, and it's ironically on my phone as well. So that's something I'm going to have to do about that. But the team, I picked the team for last year, 2024, which was pulling back from work to focus on family relationships. Last year was the busiest work year in my life. Some things I probably couldn't have said no to, but now next year, I really need to double down on that. But it was only by reviewing the year and having a goal that I realized I didn't hit the goal, and now I can go again. So you will fail on some things. That's just the reality of it. I think that's really important to recognize as well. Can you see that the document on the screen there?
Yeah, it's up there now.
Yeah, super. So this is the more extended review document with a couple of examples, and I'm just going to go through one or two sort of examples of that, and then go into the simpler document. So whatever you'll get, I'm going to share both of those with Yvonne, and she'll fire them out to you guys. So whatever works for you to use that. But what this is at its core, it's to give you perspective, because at the end of the day, like, we need sort of guidance points, guidance questions to give us that kind of perspective. So I've sort of built this on multiple different review docs I've seen over time. So I kind of love this. I love playing around with words. So you're fired. So like the most successful people, and I don't like the word success. So it's personal or professional success. Success for me is actually inner peace. That's my version of success. But the most successful people ruthlessly assess what's working and what's not. Imagine you took over your life today. What would you stop? What would you start? What's getting in the way? And these are some examples from my life. So working too much, I'd stop working too much. I'd stop spending time on my phone. I'd eliminate toxic relationships that are in my life. What would I start? Creating better boundaries, getting fitter and healthier. That's something I do, but for somebody else. These are just examples that you could use. And what's getting in the way? The busyness of modern life. So many people are too busy to do the important thing. So just these questions can give you just a flashpoint of what's actually happening. So, and it's a different way of phrasing it and giving you a little bit of a different perspective on it. I think this is one of the most important ones. This is where I spend a lot of time. And I personally would spend about probably 3 to 5 hours reflecting and thinking about these questions. But again, if you only have 20 minutes, give it 20 minutes, whatever works for you. So more or less, what gave you energy? Spending time with people, that's a big one. If I spend time with like-minded people, that gives me energy. I met a couple of my heroes this year, and like Gabor Mate was my ultimate hero, and I actually got time to spend working with him this year, and I had energy for weeks after. So it's like spending time with people that lift you higher just gives you energy. So think about that. What gave you energy throughout the year? Good food, playing with your pet, rest, whatever it was. What drained you? What gave you meaning? They're key. What do I need to spend more time on next year? What do I need to spend less time on next year? Simple little questions, but really powerful. But the gold is in the reflection. And what I would say here, and the reason why I don't like doing this list, I love when I have it done, because reflection is hard. You're sort of thinking through time, and sometimes nothing comes to mind and you're sitting with it. So a couple of things you could do with this: you could get out a blank page and just throw things on a page. You could ask other people, as David said, what do you think I should spend more time on next year or less time on this year? And it could be your professional or personal life. So just spending a little bit of time with these questions, whether it's journaling, reflection, but give it space and give it time. The other questions are inner circle, like, we are the average of the people we spend most time with. We'll eventually adopt their habits and mindsets over time. So who do I spend time with that pulls me down? Who do I spend time with that lifts me up? And the other one there, I love this question, is like a film crew. If there was a film crew following you around all day, documenting your life, and I'm not talking about what you would like the world to see you as, the fake version of yourself. What would they want to see the real you as? And like, what would you want that film crew to see? And for me, I'm a bit of a people pleaser. It's something that I do. I say yes too often. So saying no was a big one for me next year, sticking to the boundaries that I create. And I want the film crew to see my authentic self, having fun with people, a disciplined lifestyle. These are things that are actually important to me. There's some of the things that I had on my list. But then what are the things you don't want the film crew to see? Scrolling on your phone, gossiping, complaining, not acting in alignment with your values, with what's important to you. And again, it's not about the film crew. It's not about that. It's about giving yourself a different perspective shift to think about these questions. And there's going to be similarities and variations within these questions. But what you're trying to get to the guts of at the end of the day is to pull out things from your life from the year that were either getting you in the direction, guiding you towards your true north, or pulling you away from where you want to be in life. That's the goal at the end of the day, so you can review it and then make a plan. Now, I'm not going to go into the planning section. I'll let David jump into that now, but I do want to share just one other little doc, just a simpler little document that you can use, and I think it could be easier. It's very similar. It's the same thing in a way. Let me just share. And that's it there. So this is just a short form one pager. Imagine you took over your life today. What would you stop? What would you start? What's getting in the way? Over the past year, what gave you energy? What drained you? Over the next year, what do you want to spend more time on, less time on? The people you spend your time around, focus on that. And then the goals again. Dave's going to jump into that, but at the end of the day, it is quite simple. What's your goals? Do you have the systems in place? What do you need to change? So I'm going to throw that over to you there, David, to get into the planning section.
Yeah, look, some really good stuff there, Brian. And I think one thing that kind of, again, as you're talking there, I'm kind of thinking in my own head going like, well, what are the tools that I would use and things like that. And one thing that I would always use was I kind of rephrase exactly what you had there is purpose, truth, and action. So again, like the purpose, what is it that you want to do? Where do you want to go? Simple question, but again, it can take you a little bit of time to try and figure that out. And when you do, it's like the honest question of like, well, what's stopping me? What's the truth in this? Why can't I put the phone down? Or why can't I get out and exercise more? Or why can't I be more focused in work? Or whatever it might be. And it's been honest with yourself. And off the back of that, then it's putting actions in place. It's the little things that maybe you can do on a daily basis consistently that will enable you to kind of achieve what you want to achieve. And I think that kind of ties nicely into that purpose, that direction. You mentioned the true north is having a goal, a simple thing that maybe you want to aim for. And again, we're all individual. It could be different things to different people. It could be in the world of exercise. It could be in the world of, car, house, holiday. It could be looking for that promotion. Whatever it is for you is very, very important, because that in itself can be a massive motivating factor, and give you that sense of drive and also that purpose as we head into a new year. So again, there's absolutely no harm in writing a few things down that you would love to achieve. And the easiest thing is if myself and Brian were having this conversation with you and challenging you in 12 months time, what was the thing you wanted to achieve in 2025 and are you there yet? And that's a simple way of actually going, okay, well, what is it that I want to do? And I think what Brian outlined there, again, is fantastic because it's looking at a holistic approach. It's like what gives you energy, and energy is absolutely massively important in terms of just that drive for yourself. What gives you energy? Is it your kids? Is it your loved ones? Is it, that ability to go, do you know what? I want to go away. I want to work. I want to create the money that I enable to bring my family away on a holiday. Simple little things like that can be really important, because I came across people, and I've often said this before, I go to a counselor and it's fantastic. I love it, because I'm open, I'm honest. And one of the things that we were talking about was like, sometimes people it might be negative towards their work. Oh, it's I'm fed up with this, I'm fed up with that. But if we try and maybe, and I'm not saying people are fed up with the work, I'm just saying that this is sometimes one of the common things that we tend to hear. But if you flip that in your head, what does your work enable you to do? Well, it enables me to, go away with my family, put a roof over my head, drive a car, go shopping, whatever it might be. That in itself is very, very important, and there's a value on that. So sometimes we focus on maybe the thing that, we're struggling with, the thing that is hard, and the thing that maybe we feel like it's difficult to go and ask for the feedback because it's uncomfortable. And I think we need to get comfortable being uncomfortable in order to realize, okay, well, what do we want? Where do we want to go? And that can be a great kind of grounding environment situation, just to maybe get us to think about, okay, well, what's important to me? What is of value, and what is the thing that I'd love to do more of? We'd all love to go on more holidays. And it's interesting, as Brian was kind of using that term, okay, I want to pull back from work. And, I think sometimes in Ireland where people go, oh, hell yeah, are you busy? Are you busy? And we have to reply and go, oh yeah, I'm busy. Because if you don't, then it's like, oh God, is everything okay? You're like, I'm grand. And like that for me was something I really, really struggled with, because I came from a high performance world of sport. And if I wasn't at that level in the next phase of my life, well, oh my God, I'm a failure. So the easy thing to do is, oh, I'm really busy, really busy. But was I doing quality work of value? No, I wasn't. And that's the honest truth. And it's only in the last couple of years, by communicating, by talking, by actually literally getting a pen and paper out and asking myself, what do I enjoy doing? What makes me feel good about myself? Well, you know what? Let's try and do more of that. I can remember dropping Oscar to creche one day on I think it was a Tuesday morning. And I came out of the creche, and as I was jumping back in the car, two lads passed me on a bike just on a Tuesday morning. They were going cycling up the Dublin Mountains. And I remember just looking up the road and watching them going off up the mountain. And I didn't know who they were. I didn't know what they did for a living. I envied them. I was like, look at them. Look at the freedom. Whatever they do, they've created something that enables them to do something that they love to do. And that was a massive, massive mantra for me that year. Was like, I want to be those lads on the bike. And I put a value on exercise, and I put a value on running because it makes me feel good. Yes, I have to move things around, work-wise, kids, all that, but that's important to me. So again, a goal of exercise, a goal of, I want to do a marathon. That's of huge importance to me, because I know the impact that has positively on all other aspects of my life. Going back to even have a bit of clarity, you're muddling through stuff. You go out for a run, it's like, okay, yes, a bit of calmness. And again, that's very important. And that can just be a driver in terms of, creating a goal off the back of it. And the thing I'd say about goals as well, your goal doesn't have to be the finished article. You don't have to sit down before Christmas and, oh my God, I need a goal for 2025, or January. Oh my God, what's my goal for this year? You might get the goal in February. You might get a goal in April. That's okay. And I think we need to allow ourselves to be nice and flexible with this. You may be struggling to figure out, what is that goal that I want to do? You might have 10 goals, and again, if you allow yourself to refine it, and you allow yourself to just even think about it and allow yourself to review, what did you enjoy in 2024? What made you feel good about yourself? Well, you know what? That could be the driver going into 2025. So I do think a goal is very important because it gives you a sense of direction. I do think telling people what you want to do in 2025 is good, because there's an element of accountability, and that's okay too. I think, as Brian can reference, having kind of 10 goals, that's fine too. If you hit 2 of them, excellent. If you hit 1 of them, brilliant. If you hit all 10, tell me how. And I think that's just part of the evolution of a goal, and understanding that, what, this is something that is meaningful for me. I'm going to write it down. I'm going to try then and build a plan. And that's probably the biggest part of having a goal, is having a plan, having a strategy about how you're going to achieve it. Because it goes back to that quote that I always use: a goal without a plan is just a wish. And what we don't want people to do is just go into 2025 wishing that things will change. You need to take an element of ownership. You need to sit down. You need to have a goal and then work your way back. Okay, well, who's going to help me? How am I going to achieve it? What do I need to do in order to get there? And again, it could be like upskilling. Okay, well, what course do you need to go on? It could be, okay, do you know what? I want to make more money. Okay, well, what do you need to do that? Oh, I want to go on a holiday. Okay, well, how are you going to get the money? How are you going to, plan it? What way does it work? And I think in terms of, the world of sport, everything is measured. And we would always have sat down We would have got feedback from different people. We would have put a plan in place and a structure and a key kind of route as to how we were going to get to the top of that pyramid. Be it 44 seconds, an Olympic gold medal, whatever it might be, there is a plan and there is a structure, and there's people involved in it as well. And I think that's very, very important in terms of when people are maybe planning for 2025. Don't forget about that structure, that plan, that strategy as to how you're going to achieve it. Because I know there's people on this call who are very, very probably, they collaborate, they communicate in the corporate world with a vision and mission. But again, on a personal level, what is your vision, your mission, and your strategy? And those are very, very important things to bring into 2025 in terms of planning. So again, it's just that route map. It's literally just going, okay, I want to get to here. I'm here. I need to kind of create the little path that enables me to get there, and who are the people that are going to help me. So I don't know, Brian, if you have anything to add to that. I think it's just an open conversation around the importance of having a bit of direction, and as you said, your true north.
Yeah, and do you know what I'd like to do, Dave? Nearly bring this into prioritization now as well, because I love all that stuff. And something that I've done, I used to set too many goals. That was a challenge I had. Where I've gone now, a lot of my goals are kind of high level value kind of goals, like it's good health, mental, emotional, and physical. It is good relationships. That's where my goals lie, and they're the priorities. And one of the things I've often found in my own life, like sometimes people say that I'm too busy to plan, I'm too busy to go up the mountains for a bike ride, whereas they're the things you need to do to get where you need to go. Like it's like we're putting out fires all the time, but if you focus on these sort of key goals, like spending time with loved ones, meditation, exercise, whatever it is to you, you'll be able to pull back and see, right, loads of them fires I'm putting out, I don't even need to be put out. I shouldn't even be at the bloody fire. So when you do these review processes and you start prioritizing things, right, that's not even important. That's not important for me. That goal isn't important. So I think that's really, really key. We need to prioritize. And the word priority, I'm fascinated by the etymology of words. The word priority means the one thing. That's where it came from. What is the one thing? But in Western cultures, we don't say priority anymore. It's what's your priorities. And I fell into that trap, and I had multiple priorities. And it brings me back to a story, David, we chatted about before. It's your story with perfection. And it sounded like you had a lot of priorities to fulfill that perfection. So could you chat a little bit about that and how it leans into priorities as well, a little bit about both of them sides?
Yeah, well, you mentioned there having too many kind of goals or too many priorities. Like, if I go back to 2007, it was Olympic year for Beijing, 2008. So like first Olympics, I'd qualified. You want absolutely everything to be not only right, but you want it to be perfect. And I can remember starting off my year, which would have been September 2007, because again, in the athletic world, you're building to the following August, and I would have been so fixated on, okay, I want to run 44 seconds. Why? Because good chance if I ran that, I would have made an Olympic final. So then you start going, well, I need to rest well. So everything became about rest. I need to be in bed at 10 p.m. My food, everything had to be measured out exactly the way it was. I stopped going out with people because I didn't want to go to a restaurant because I couldn't control what was on the plate of food. So again, very rigid. Very much kind of, no, this is the way I need to do it. So there was no flexibility. Again, even kind of on a rest day, I had to rest. Literally, I would sit on my backside and not leave the house because I needed to rest for the Monday, and then we train again till the Saturday. The fun suddenly kind of went out of it all. It all became very, very much performance related, and everything had to use that word perfection, perfection, perfection. Even to the point, people might remember the little the iPad or iPod Nano, the little tiny one that you clip on. And I remember buying one. It was red, and you're able to get free engraving on it. And what did I put on it? To be perfect. That was my mantra. And long story short, I stressed myself out to the max, to the point where I had a viral infection in the holding camp going into the Beijing Olympic Games. I flew into Beijing, knew I wasn't right, didn't run well. That was it. Olympic Games, Olympic dream, over, done. And I can remember then coming home, and even what you referenced there, where do you get that bit of clarity, or how do you get that? Is it going out for a walk or whatever it might be? I went for a walk with Charlotte, my now wife. We were boyfriend, girlfriend back then, and we were on Inishbofin off the west coast of Ireland. And it was a conversation. She said to me, like, how do you think the year went? And I said, well, I didn't enjoy it. And she just said, well, why? And I said, you know what? I just tried to do everything 110%. There was no fulfillment. You know, this word perfection, you know, where is perfection? It's subjective. You know, I could never meet perfection because I always wanted more. It was never good enough. It was never good enough. So what happened? I ended up stressing myself out. And I think that for me was a massive, massive learning curve that year, because I just realized, you know what, like I'm not enjoying this. You know, there was no flexibility, there was no boundaries. It just consumed my whole entire life. So even though my goal was to run as fast as I possibly could, I got fixated on the minor details to the point where like everything had to be perfect. And as a result, it wasn't. And I think like the following year, it became about you strive for excellence. You just try and do the best that you can in those different areas. And that's the most important thing. And have a little bit of enjoyment, create those boundaries. When are we on? When are we off? Because going for a walk with the dog, kicking a football with your son or daughter, like those are the moments that give us a bit of joy. They fill the emotional tank. And even in those moments, you get a bit of clarity of what's important in your lives. And I think that was one of the things I brought into 2009, which ended up being my best year on the track. And it was such a contrast to the year before, but I allowed myself debrief, allowed myself to sit down, a pen and paper with the people that mattered most in my world and actually listen to them. You know, ask them a question and be willing to take that feedback and go, do you know what? Because they see different things. They see how I was acting. And that's very important. And I think, you know, I don't like that word perfect or perfection. I don't like it. I don't use it because it brings me back to that year. And again, that's not a bad thing because I learned an awful lot about myself. And again, I think for people going in to a new year and we hear New Year's resolutions and goals and plans, you know, you have to allow yourself to be fluid, not too rigid. And I think it's so important that you allow yourself to explore, you allow yourself to even think in your own head, okay, well, what do I enjoy doing? What gives me that sense of fulfillment? And that's very, very important.
I love that, Dave. Such a powerful story. And you know, it's the most powerful thing to come from that. You learned so much from what was like one of your, what could be called like a big failure for yourself personally. I'm sure that's what you call it at the time, like, you know, where 100%. Failure led to success as well. It's crazy. There's a lovely segue in there, Dave, as well. I'm just noticing we're nearly up on time, just to leave a few bit of time for questions and answers. But it's like tapping into this. We didn't touch on motivation. I think the word motivation, I think we'll really build on this in the session in 2025, because motivation and habits really go hand in hand to giving you the motivation to do that. But one of the things that really vibes with me there, and in terms of perfection, because there's a perfectionist in me as well. There's people pleasing in me. There's perfectionism in me. And I'm always trying to battle these things. But I heard a mantra one time that done is better than perfect. And over time, I've been really letting that sink in. Done is better than perfect. And that really helps me to be motivated. Like, where's the link with that? Because when I came up to the review for the year and the plan for the year, in my head, I had to have it perfect. I had to be perfect. And I was rigid. Yeah. And you're talking about being rigid, David. Even you sitting and resting, I can see it all rigid, resting on the seat. Like, it's like your body was rigid while you were resting. It's that word rigidity. We need to be flexible within that. So for me, when I was doing my plan this morning and I started the plan, I didn't get it finished. It was like, right, done is better than perfect. Let's just get it done, get it started. And then that gave me the motivation, because if I had to be perfect and perfect doesn't exist, I'm not going to be motivated to do something that's so difficult. So sometimes we just have to let it flow. We just have to think to ourselves, done is better than perfect. Let's just get started and see where it goes. And that's where motivation lives. Don't be putting Mount Everest in front. Like, if you have to climb Mount Everest every single day, you're going to get to Tuesday and you're going to be like, hell no. We've got to make things small and potentially that we can handle them to build that motivation.
And a bit of enjoyment as well. I think, you know, look at a review as an opportunity to learn and grow. It's not a negative. And I think sometimes we're a bit resistant to look back because, you know, we don't want honest truths, or maybe, oh, I didn't do that well, or I could have done that better, and you feel guilty. Whereas in my experience, I've learned more from the difficult times. You mentioned Beijing as a failure. Yeah, I went through that whole I was a failure until I actually allowed myself to go, hang on a second, this could be one of the best things that ever happened to me. And it was, and again, but I allowed myself to go, do you know what? I didn't do that right. Hold my hands up. I could have done that better. And when you allow yourself to you know, just learn from it, you actually grow. And I think that's one of the key things. And you mentioned kind of that motivation. Like if we don't enjoy, like I coach kids, okay, and like they run around playing football, they go playing GA and they do a bit of athletics. When they have a smile on their face, you know that they're motivated. They're motivated to come back the following week. If they don't enjoy it and it's too much of shouting and doing this and doing that, they're not going to continue doing it. So we need to learn from our kids, because we were all kids and we got involved in things because we found it fun, we found it social, and we learned things. And even as a coach, you're enthusiastic with them. You're like, yeah, you're jumping up and down, you're giving them directions and stuff like that, but it's fun and it's engaging. And I think that's the thing about a review. We can look back and we go, yeah, look, that wasn't great, but look what I could do. Look what I maybe should have done. I can bring that in. It's just carrying that into the following year with a bit of enthusiasm, and more chance that we'll actually adhere to it and actually do it.
Yeah, I love that. I like it. I love it. That's what motivation is. Put it in simple terms. Big smile on your face. That's motivation right there. Love
Absolutely.
that. Really do.
Super. Guys, thanks a million for being so honest and sharing your experiences. I'm sure that everybody here, including myself, has written down at least 3 pages of notes, things that I want to take away. And definitely a goal without a plan is just a wish, is something that I'll be ingrained in my brain from now on. But we just want to hand it over to everyone on the call today. So we've quite a number of people on the call now. And while we have David and Brian with us, is there any questions that anyone would like to ask? I don't see anything in the Q&A box just yet, but if anyone would like to unmute themselves and ask a question, please do.
David, the guys, that was brilliant. I'd love to know, what's your new mantra if it's not to be perfect anymore?
Yeah, and you put me on the spot now. Do you know what it is? It's excellence, to be brutally honest, and I kind of touched on that, but I broke it down. Like, to be perfect was just like, was everything in my whole entire life had to be perfect. Whereas now, excellence for me is it's a process, it's a journey. And I've kind of accepted that, like, what, if I can focus on the process, well then, the outcome will look after itself. So the process for me is, being with the kids, having a good bit of balance in my work, taking ownership, taking control. And something that Brian touched on there as well is allowing myself to say no, which kind of leads into that kind of my gut, allowing myself to trust my gut. So again, it's having the freedom. What I do, I try to be good at what I do. So if I'm with the kids, I'm trying to be mentally and physically present. That's excellence. In my work, haven't been planned and, hopefully coming across with a bit of a few tips and advice, that's excellence for me. In my own kind of exercise, when I go and I run, to try and be as good as I can be, hence I turn up and I do 5Ks, I do marathons. It's about me. It's not about anybody else. And I think that in itself is excellence for me. So again, that's kind of the way I approach things now. So the mantra is about excellence rather than perfection.
I love that.
Are there any other questions? Don't see any hands up.
It's a good one in there. It doesn't have to be perfect to be perfect. Exactly.
I think in terms of if you were to start your review now, coming off the back, I suppose, of this webinar, I'll put it to both of you. You can take that document, but what do you think is the best space to review? Would you do it by yourself first and then go out to your network? What's your approach?
Yeah, I think for yourself is just giving yourself the freedom to maybe mull over the questions, be honest with yourself. And even like, I always think sometimes, like, you don't have to have the pen and paper out and have all the answers straight away. It's a process, and it's allowing yourself to maybe mull over, like, what are the things that you enjoyed in 2024, and then kind of start. And I think, like, you don't need to be quick to come back with like bang, bang, bang. this is it. This is the finished article. It's allowing yourself to maybe explore your own feelings and your own thoughts yourself. And then you can bring people in for a bit of feedback, and their feedback may not be it doesn't have to be the right stuff, or it's their opinion, but it might correlate a little bit with some of the stuff that you've maybe thought about as well.
Yeah, and it's that I find some of the gems that drop personally for me. I could be driving in the car, I could be out for a run, I could be in the shower. For some reason, they're the three places that things tend to pop into my head. So it's like the review is like the stepping stone to the process nearly of the download coming into your head. And then you could be just having a conversation with people, like thinking of questions rather than answers, like other questions rather than answers. Like something that's just after popping into my head there would be like, if I was trying to perfect something, what would I have to drop to get to excellence? You know that way? What's the difference between perfection and excellence for you? That's sort of thinking about those two terms at the setting off something in my head, thinking about it in terms of that. So, because we all have different ways of thinking about the world, and different words mean different things to us because of our experiences with those words and stuff like that as well. So there's no rigid set way of doing this. So just be open to the fact that everyone will have their own way of doing this. Maybe it'll work chatting to people, maybe it'll work mulling over yourself. Think of yourself as a scientist, sort of exploring this for yourself. And it's a process going forward over the years. I think that's key.
Yeah.
I see there's a question here from Jacqueline as well. She said, you mentioned setting your vision, mission and goals, but as an individual, how do you start? Is it the template? Is that where you start? In terms of the questions, I guess. Yeah, if the questions you're asking yourself in terms of setting your vision, mission and goals, how do you start? Is it to use the template?
You could go online and just say, what's a good review planner? What vibes with you? The one that I use is something that I've garnered from multiple different things over time. So that's what I've used over time. But it's finding what works for you. So maybe because we've done this call, start with that, but then mix it in with other things as well. Like me and Dave were talking, and you're talking about SWOT analysis. Like a SWOT analysis is a great way of doing it as well. There's multiple different tools, but find what works for you, and don't get too focused on the perfect tool. Sometimes that can be a way to procrastinate and not do it. Just get started. Pick one question and just get started. What do I want to do more of? What do I want to do less of? What energizes me? What these kind of questions, super simple questions, can be really good.
Yeah. Sorry. Just going to say, a vision is kind of like, I suppose, the way of looking at the vision is like where you aspire to go, so again, you can look at it from that perspective. Okay, my vision is I want to be this, or I want to do this, or I want to have this. That can kind of help in terms of like maybe a vision of what it is. And I kind of referenced that earlier on about like purpose true. So what's the purpose? The vision's tied into that in terms of where I'd love to go, or what I'd love to achieve.
Yeah, I was going to add that in and say the roadmap that you said earlier, David, about setting where do you want to go. I think it was something that really, really landed with me earlier. And Helen, I see, asked a question as well, which is, how frequently should you review your goals? Should it be monthly, every 3 months? Or is there a risk of checking them too often? Should you, let them sit for a while? I know you said that habits don't happen overnight. And it might take some time to get to our goals. And we may never get there either. Let's be honest. Like you said, if you achieve all your goals by the end of the year, you're doing something very, very, very right.
Yeah, like I think like as frequently as you would like. I don't think we should put kind of like, too many boundaries on it. And also even with the goal is like, you know what, you might have to review that goal. You might kind of have to go, do you know what, maybe that was a bit of a stretch goal, maybe. And like this is, I think, mentally as well, when you put a goal kind of up here, it's like it has to be up here. But in actual fact, things change. You might need to bring that down a little bit, make it a little bit more sustainable, and that's okay. So I think it's kind of been honest with yourself, reviewing it as you go. I don't think you should put a number on it. It could be monthly, it could be every couple of months. I think once you're checking in and once you're actually, not comparing yourself, but like reviewing it, I think that's a positive.
Yeah, and even as a baseline, I totally agree with that. It's changed for me over time. It's back to what we said at the start. Different things work for different people. There's not one format that works for everyone. I tend to go. I put it in my calendar every 3 months. I do a check every 3 months. Review your goals, but sometimes it's the process of the reviewing that activates the action and it goes from there as well. There's a magic in a review and a plan that just sort of implements certain actions within that as well. But I think 3 months is sort of, a lot of companies do that as well, the quarterly review. It's not too much, it's not too demotivating, and just have a little check on it every now and then, but don't get too caught up in those details.
Yeah, and Katie just mentioned about the grow model. Again, it's a good tool. If you Google grow model, it'll pop up. And again, it just gives you a bit of a template and a bit of a structure to put things in place.
Absolutely. Do you ever find, Brian, when you put that in your calendar, that it ever gets skipped? Or are you diligent to stick with it?
It has, and I've gotten better at it in the last year. There's a thing that I do as well. I have a balance wheel checker. I might send that to you as well, actually, Yvonne. It's an interactive balance wheel, so I have that once a month, and it basically comes up in my calendar, and you click on the balance wheel, and it rates out of 10 where you are in the different areas of your life, your spiritual life, your financial life, your this life. And I used to skip it all the time. And I was like, right, this takes 60 seconds. That's all it takes once a month. And I start using it consistently. And it's another what gets measured, gets managed tool. So over time, like all of these things, I didn't start using these and all of a sudden I do them all the time. I've learned through messing it up over time as well. I'm sure I'll mess it up again in the future. That's all right too. Perfection does not exist.
Absolutely. I think that's really important. I think it goes back to something that both of you said at the very start, which is putting a value on reflecting and on doing this review and actually planning. So having that value on it probably keeps you more accountable to not just delete said calendar appointment out.
And so just to jump in on that as well, like I know we hear about kind of journaling now as even a mindfulness sort of exercise, but I think even just writing down your own thoughts.
Yeah.
And look, it's a starting point. If you've never done it before, no problem. But if you ever feel like, you know what, I just want to get words or things out of my head, writing them down, and over time, it's actually a great tool to have, you know, because you could get to the end of, say, 2025 and you look back at a diary and you're going, God, look at all the words, the things that maybe that, you know, were impacting me at that time, because a year is quite long. There's a lot of stuff going on in our lives. You forget about maybe how you felt at certain moments and certain times. And I think that's kind of an ongoing, it doesn't take a lot of work. It's just a couple of words or feelings or whatever. And then at the end of the year, kind of looking back at that, and that can just refresh, you know what, I did that task, or I had that role, or I had a difficult client. Those are the things and the emotions I felt at that time that can give you a bit of guidance going in maybe to the following year.
Brilliant. I might ask you about one more question and then, oh, sorry, John has come in with a question. So he's asked David how you handled the athletes sensitively after their events in the Olympics resonated with everyone, not necessarily goal related, but can you share your reflections on that and how you managed to do that during the Summer Olympic Games?
Yeah, I'm laughing at Brian because we actually spoke about this recently. And I appreciate that, John. You're very kind. And like first of all, like Paris was an absolute privilege. It was a privilege to be there, to interact with all of our great athletes and indeed some of the superstars of world athletics. I was a little bit nervous going into Paris because, like, Paris is the Olympic Games. We did very well in Rome at the European level, you know, and athletes are coming up, they performed well, they're happy, they're enthusiastic, they're smiling. It's easy to talk to people when they're in that frame of mind. I kind of, with Paris, was like, well, you know, it's going to be harder to make finals, it's going to be harder to win medals. What are the athletes going to be like when they come up to me? And the hardest interviews are obviously when people are, you know, hasn't gone well, or they haven't performed as well as they liked. But I was telling Brian that when I started on the kind of, you know, the media side, I was very nervous, and I was at an indoor European Championships many years ago, and I was beside a reporter from the BBC who, in actual fact, I knew he would have interviewed me. He was well established and he'd been around for years. His name was Phil Jones, and really nice man. Got talking to him. And I was like, come on, Phil, give me some advice. And he said to me, and this is something I always remembered, he said, David, don't plan. And I know we've talked about planning and stuff like this now, but he said, don't plan. And I was like, what do you mean? Because what I used to do, I would plan everything. I'd know everything about that individual athlete. I'd know everything about the event, their times. And what I forgot about was being present and remembering that people at home are watching this on TV. They don't really care about what happened last year or next year. They want to know about what they've just watched, the 10 seconds or the 50 seconds, whatever it might be. And he said to me, look, don't plan. You know your subject matter. Be present in the moment and interact with the individual. And that's exactly what I did. So in Paris, I had the luxury of watching their body language when they cross the finish line, and initially how they react to it. I can watch as they're coming up to me, and that tells you an awful lot. And then it's not about me, it's about them, asking them a question and listening to them and just giving them the opportunity to talk to people back home, friends, family, fans, whatever it might be. And someone asked me this question recently, about Paris, and the way I kind of put it was like, you know what, for one of the first times in a couple of years, I was so present. I was in that flow. And again, I was chatting to Brian. I don't know what it is. I don't know how. It was just, I took control. I took the earpiece out, so I wasn't listening to the studio back home. I wasn't listening to the gallery back in Dublin, like producers and all these. I literally took the earpiece out and I just was present, and I just allowed myself to forget about cameras and just talk to these people as human beings. And that was the way I approached it, And I think, I'll be honest, I've gone through mixed zones on bad days and good days, and I could empathize with how they felt. And again, for anyone here who's managing teams or who's gone up through various businesses, like, don't forget about the people that are coming behind. And I think if you show that level of empathy, that human side and that human connection, it's far easier. And I think that's just kind of how Paris rolled, and it was brilliant. But I think my main goal was, I wanted to give the athletes the opportunity to talk to people back home. And if I'm really honest, I've 3 young kids. I've an 8-year-old, a 6-year-old, and a 3-year-old. My 8-year-old and 6-year-old love running, and my 8-year-old Oscar, his favorite athlete is a Dutch hurdler called Femke Bol. She's brilliant. Okay, she got a bronze medal in the women's 400-meter hurdles. One of my goals was that when I was growing up, I'd watch RTE or whatever, and you would never hear from the international stars of the sport. You'd have to flick over to BBC to get that. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to try and interview as many international stars, including Femke Bol and all the medal winners, as often as I can. So I was like a pest. Anyone that came past me, I was like, come here, talk to me. And not to go on about it, but I was in position 40. So that means that there was 39 people ahead of me in the queue to talk to these people. But in fairness, we got some great athletes, and I'm just delighted my kids at home were able to watch some of the superstars, both Irish and international, and just raise the profile of track and field. And that was my big goal going into it.
No, that's a great way to, I think, close out today's session.
You're up against Femke Bol, apparently.
Not quite. But no, I think that, so much of that is so relatable, I think, to anyone even working in the business world, because being present, and even while we're in this time of year in December, where I'm sure everybody here is going through some form of performance review with their own teams, and you can come in with a preconceived agenda on both sides, and often we do forget to just be present in what is a really, really important conversation at the end of the year. So I think that that's a really important note, and something that I think is something we all should very much take away. But look, thank you everyone for your time this morning. Thank you so much to Brian, and thank you so much to David for giving you up their time today. And we will be back again for part 2 in January. We'll be touching base with everyone on the call today. We'll send out the recording. The documents that Brian shared with you earlier will also be included in that, and we'll be sending out the registration link if you want to come back for part 2 in early January, where we'll be, taking this motivation trend and topic and kind of bringing it out a little bit more. And then we'll be talking about how do we build sustainable habits, staying accountable, and then overcoming inevitable setbacks. So thanks again to everyone, and thanks Brian, and thanks David.
No problem. Thanks, Yvonne, and thanks everyone for logging
Thanks,
on.
Vaughn. Thanks, David. Happy reviewing and planning to everyone. See you in the new year.
Merry Christmas.
Yeah.
Yeah.